Hi there, and welcome to this tour of St Clements, the Borough Church in Hastings. This is the entrance in the High Street on the corner of High Street and Swan Terrace. The church was built in the 14th century. Here we have the tower, and at the top of the tower of great interest are the pair of cannonballs. The one on the right is a real cannonball, reputedly fired there by a French raid. The one on the left has been put there by the locals to add a piece of symmetry, or so they say. Hi, so here we are, St Clements Church in Hastings Old Town. We just come in the porch. We're here in lockdown on a Saturday, which is really quite strange because you wouldn't expect it to be empty on a Saturday. Usually this place is heaving with people having cups of tea and clubs and things going on, but bell ringing and all sorts of things, handbells, big bells. So we're in the porch, and already we've got a few things of interest to show you. This isn't only a historical tour, this is a living, working church. So we're going to show you a few things around and about the place. So let's have a look at the porch first. Hi, so here we are, St Clements Church in Hastings Old Town. We just come in the porch. We're here in lockdown on a Saturday, which is really quite strange because you wouldn't expect it to be empty on a Saturday. Usually this place is heaving with people having cups of tea and clubs and things going on, but bell ringing and all sorts of things, handbells, big bells. So we're in the porch, and already we've got a few things of interest to show you. This isn't only a historical tour, this is a living, working church. So we're going to show you a few things around and about the place. So let's have a look at the porch first. So as we come up the steps, first thing you'll see is this modern door. That modern door was put there in 2013 because, thanks to the bequest of one of the parishioners, Barbara Jordan, we've managed to completely refurbish the church, and what we've tried to do is to maintain all of the ancient features so that they're still there for everybody to see, whilst at the same time making it a modern living church and everybody to use. So here we have a modern door. So as you're in the porch, here's a plaque from the Sussex Heritage Trust 2013 that the church were given for the restoration because it's considered to be such a good restoration, and we're very, very pleased with that. To the left of the plaque, here we have a window which was given to the church in 1962. It's the work of Marjorie May, and it's in memory of the treasurer of the PCC, Frank Henry Smith. Now the PCC stands for the Parochial Church Council. The Parochial Church Council are the people that look after the church. They look after not only the building, but the finances, the liturgy, the worship, and all that sort of thing. Similar, I suppose, to a charity trustee. Okay, so let's go in and see what we can see. Here we are, St Clements Church, Hastings Old Town. Okay, so as we come in the church, first two things I want to show you are a pair of modern memorials. This one over here is to Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan very sadly died in 2006. She was one of the parishioners, but she is the person that gave the money for this refurbishment. And then here we have the memorial to Nicky Harris. Nicky Harris was a good friend of mine. She was church warden, and she did so much work for this church. She absolutely loved this building, and so we here have the memorial to Nicky along with the piece of furniture that we have made in her memory. And then up on the wall we have the a painting, well, it's not a painting, it's a copy of a painting by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, because one of the main things this church has as a claim to fame is that Rossetti was married here to Elizabeth Siddal. So here's a memorial to Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and it says, dedicated to the memory of Rossetti, whose glory it is to have done so much to strengthen the love of beauty in art and literature and in life. And there's a wonderful sonnet underneath it that you can come and read sometime. So here we have 3 memorials just inside the front door of 3 people, both contemporary and in the last century, who have been very important in this parish. So here we are then in the Lady Chapel, looking at the Lady Chapel altar at the moment. You can see on the front of the altar there's a carving, typical carving of the Lamb of God, based on Revelation. As we look above the altar, we can see the first of the windows made by Philip Cole. Now, Philip Cole was the former principal of the Hastings School of Art, and it replaced the original window, which was blown out in 1943. Philip Cole's windows are very well known as pieces of stained glass and pieces of art, and in particular I'd like you to note that both Joseph and the baby Jesus are dark-skinned. To the left and right of the window there are figures of Moses and Aaron, and those were painted by Roger Mortimer in 1721. This window actually was originally in the frame to the left, and it survived the bomb. It's a fairly important window. It was made by one of the minor pre-Raphaelites, but in particular it shows the Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is when Jesus went up the mountain, and 2 of the apostles saw Jesus standing there as God alongside Elijah and Moses, and it says, "Here's my loved son in whom I'm well pleased, hear ye him." So it's one of the few actual stained glass windows of the Transfiguration that can be found anywhere. And here we have a carving of the Adoration of the Magi. It was made by John Reed of the Royal Academy in 1955. Here we have a small triptych behind the altar in the Lady Chapel. A triptych is just 3 paintings. In cathedrals and so on, or in some other churches, you might find huge ones behind the altar. This one was painted by Philip Cole in 1913 and was presented to the Borough Church in 1964. The Lady Chapel, by the way, is the chapel which you find in every church, which is for Our Lady, that is the Mother of God, Mary, and it's used for services at various times, particularly smaller services, or sometimes if we have a huge service we might be using both altars. In the corner here we have a painting of St. Clement. Now, St. Clement is the patron saint of both fishermen and of iron workers, and the reason for that is because he was the 2nd Pope, and he was martyred by being tied to an anchor and drowned at sea. So, this is the organ. It's actually another new piece that's been put into the church. It's an electronic organ. It's a fully electronic organ, and I can't open it up, but inside there are various knobs, and they say things like Salisbury Cathedral, Winchester Cathedral, Canterbury Cathedral, so because they've been sampled and put in there, so you can actually make it sound like any of them. But actually it's fully electronic. There aren't any organ pipes, which means that everything comes out of speakers. There was a pipe organ in the church, but it was only built in the 1950s. It was a real shame to see it go, but it needed so much repair. It was actually cheaper to buy an electronic organ than it was to get the old pipe organ repaired. But the pipe organ over in All Saints, which is our sister church on the other side of the valley, that is a different kettle of fish altogether, but that's for when we go over there and have a look around. So here we are looking up the nave of the church to the high altar, and then above the high altar there we have the other main Philip Cole window, which we'll come back to in a minute. The nave is the part of the church where the congregation sit. There are three parts to the church. This is the nave. The middle part is the choir or chancel. I think the word choir makes it self-explanatory. And then behind the rail there we have the sanctuary, and the sanctuary is where the altar is, and that's important because that's where Holy Communion and the sacraments happen. These are the warden's rods. These are the chairs where the church wardens would sit. We've actually got 4 church wardens in this parish, not 2, because we've got 2 for this church and 2 for St Clements. Most parishes only have 2. And there are 2 wardens. There's the vicar's warden and there's the people's warden. If we look up, we come to see the chandeliers. These 2 chandeliers date to 1762. The one nearest the altar was given by the then mayor, Edward Millward. And when the church was restored in 1872, so this is, it's had a couple of restorations, the chandeliers were taken to the Tower of All Saints where they lay forgotten. How can you forget those? They lay forgotten until 1882. An attempt was made to sell them, but in 1900 they were lent to the museum and they were returned to St Clements only in 1923. Engraved on the chandeliers it says Edward Millward, Luke Spencer, William Ashburnham, Richard Redcott, John Petcham, Rose Fuller Esquires, Barons of the Port, who supported the canopies, the coronation of King George III and Queen Charlotte on the 22nd of September 1761. The gift of the principal inhabitants of the parish in ye March 1762 to William's rector, Robert Cramp, Robert Raylyard, church wardens. Okay, so let's take a walk down the chancel. You can have a look at the ceiling. The ceiling of this church, just as the ceiling of All Saints, you probably can't see it so much here, but it's actually built in the same way as the hull of a ship, because the local shipbuilders were able to build a ceiling of that form and then just turn it upside down. So here's the first chandelier, the one that's closest to the altar. Moving around, here we have the mayor's seat. This is the seat that the mayor uses for the annual civic service. On the back of the seat you can see the crests of the Cinque Ports. The seat was put here in the 1950s. In front of the seat, this decorative thing here is to hold the town maces. The town maces are technically part of the town crown jewels. Hastings has 2 maces. It has 2 sheriffs for the 2 maces, and the 2 maces would sit there in front of the mayor. Although in fact these days the maces are considered to be too expensive to be taken out anywhere. So they're just locked away all the time because they are part of the crown jewels. But they used to go there, and in recent years the Bonfire Society have had some replicas made, and they've actually been used by the mayor. Now, Hastings is one of the Cinque Ports. It's one of the 5 ports that were instituted to guard England, and it was the premier Cinque Port, and therefore the mayorship of Hastings is a really important ancient office. This seat was put here in the 1960s, and it is the mayor's official seat. When the mayor does come to services, this is where the mayor sits. I'm sitting where the deputy mayor would sit. And in front of the mayor's seat, this thing here is to put the town maces on. Hastings has 2 maces because it's a premier cinque port, and those 2 maces are technically part of the crown jewels. They're pure silver, and as such they're now considered to be too expensive for insurance purposes to be taken anywhere. So they're not ceremonially used anymore. Although having said that, the Bonfire Society have made some replica wooden maces which are carried at the front of the Hastings bonfire every year, and mayors now ask if they can use those, so at least they've got the replica maces in front of them. So here we have the pulpit. Now the pulpit is the place where the priest would preach a sermon. Certainly used to be the place where a priest would preach a sermon, and it's deliberately here in amongst the people so that the sermon could be preached. Although these days, very often, the priest doesn't go there anymore. They stand about here, just in front of the congregation, and then here to one side is the lectern. Now, the lectern is where the prayers are read, and of course, the most important thing on the lectern is the Holy Bible. And the Holy Bible is sitting on there, and the Holy Bible would be read from there, unless the Bible is carried down into the church when the gospel is read, in which case it would be read in the centre of the congregation. So let's enter the choir. In the past, everything that the priest did would be done from the altar. In fact, the altar used to be back against the wall, and the priest would have their back to the congregation doing everything. It's only in relatively recent times that altars have been brought forwards, and priests are now behind the altar facing the congregation, so the congregation can see that things are happening. And also a lot of what the priest does now happens at the front of the chancel rather than up there at the high altar. So it's to be more inclusive. And we're here where the choir would sit in the chancel, and we're heading up towards the altar rail to the sanctuary. And the sanctuary is where everything happens when it comes to the Eucharist and it comes to the Holy Communion. The Holy Communion, the sacrament, will be blessed on the altar. Sitting up here to the right, you would have the acolytes, the altar servers, who would be assisting the priest when it comes to the blessing of the sacrament. To the left of the altar, this is a new thing that we have here in this church, is the aumbrey. The aumbrey is the place where the reserved sacrament is kept, and the reserved sacrament is where the blessed Holy Communion can sit, and it can be used at any time to be taken to the sick or anybody that might need it. So here we have the high altar here in St Clements, and of course above it the Philip Cole window. So let's take a walk down the Lady Chapel and just have a look around. This side of the church actually took a good deal of damage during World War II, when there was a huge coaching inn on the other side of the road there, called the Swan Hotel, and that was completely destroyed with a huge loss of life. It was a German bomber that was dropping its bombs on the way back, as they did anything that was left. And unfortunately, all of the windows on this side of the building were more or less blown out. You can see in this window here some of the stained glass that remains, but most of it's gone. There are various tombs and memorials to various people, because this has always been the town church. It's been the borough church. It's always been the church where the councillors and the gentry of the town used to come. And here we have the Lady Chapel, and the window there was made by Philip Cole. Here we have the Philip Cole window. It depicts the Holy Spirit emanating through God the Father, guiding the thoughts of actions of people in their daily work. And the figures are really important, because these are actually real people from Hastings who were around at the time. the local teacher, the nurse, the parish priest, fisherman, the army, the navy and the air force. And I was in here one day, and there was somebody looking at the window, and they said to me, "I love this window." I said, "It's fantastic, isn't it?" I said, "It was built by Philip Cole," and started telling the story and all the rest of it. And they said, "Yes, I know." I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I'm the baby." Here we have the altar light. The altar light is on continuously. It shows that the light of the world is always here. And it was given to the church by Rossetti, and it has written around it, Dante Gabriel Rossetti and Elizabeth Siddal married here. So that was given to us by Rossetti, and is one of our great treasures. We love it. So look at that one. So just a quick look around the sanctuary and at the other two stained glass windows that we have here. And up here to the right we have the memorial to John Collier. John Collier was mayor of this town, and gave a lot of money. What I love about this, it says John Collier, who was, though not a native, yet was inhabitant of this corporation and gave so much. That's very typically Hastings. If you weren't born here and I wasn't born here, you're never going to be quite right. The kneelers were made by the women of the parish. They're also relatively recent, and they show various biblical stories. Of course, all the stained glass and stories within churches, those are hangovers from the days when people couldn't read, and it was the only way of really getting the gospel message to people in any other way. So now we're looking from the sanctuary rail back down the church to the new meeting room that we built, and this is actually called the Clive Morris room. It was named after Clive Morris, who was the church warden at the time. Who was responsible for the refurbishment of the church, and okay, let's take a walk down the north aisle. We'll just avoid the piano, grand piano. We do have concerts and art exhibitions and things of that kind within the church. Up here, those are the speakers which are there instead of the organ pipes. And we have a pair of brasses around here. This brass is the Barley Memorial. It's named after, well, it is for John Barley, who died in 1600, was an inhabitant of this borough. And this is what's left of the brass dedicated to William Thomas, also an inhabitant of this town and somebody who came to this church in 1563. This painting here, Via Crucis, it's actually a painting of the parishioners of this church, and it was put here in 1973. The parishioners of this church annually on Good Friday do a procession of witness. And that procession of witness, we go from here onto the street and we reenact the Stations of the Cross. It's one of the traditions of Hastings that you would see on Good Friday morning. We go all the way from here to the Catholic Church in High Street, St Mary Star of the Sea, and then we finish at All Saints Church on the other side of the valley. Here we have the war memorials, World War I and World War II. Not only from St Clement here in Hastings Old Town, but also from St Clement Halton, which was on the hill above the town. When St Clement Halton was demolished, the war memorials were brought down here so that those people could continue to be remembered. So here they are. Annually, of course, we'll have the Act of Remembrance. We also have an Act of Remembrance for the Battle of Hastings, 1066, every year, when we reflect on war and the problems of war and the horrors of war, and pray that such things don't happen again. So let's just walk around to the back of the Clive Morris room. Here's the Clive Morris room, which we now use for meetings. And here we have the refurbished belfry. The bell ropes are now up there. It used to be rung from the floor, and it was quite a difficult tower to ring. It's so much better now. And as we walk around here, we get to our new coffee area, where after services we break and we drink coffee and enjoy our fellowship with each other. Here we have the rectors of this church, going all the way back to 1331. The last one on there was Father Robert, and we've now had to start a new one for Father Luke that was there between 2017 and 2019. Below that we have a small chunk of what's left of the rood screen. The rood screen used to sit there in front of the chancel. And in the past, people actually wouldn't see. I was telling you earlier about the priest used to have his back to the congregation, and now he comes down and stands in front of the congregation. In the past, everything used to happen behind this screen, so people couldn't see anything, which is why bells are rung at communion, because the people would be sitting there, they couldn't see anything that's going on, so they'd be sitting there doing their knitting, having a chat, having a natter, and just generally not taking any notice what was going on because they couldn't see. And then the bell was rung. Oh, it's now time to do something. And below we have the oldest tomb here. We believe it's one of the early rectors, but it's certainly a very ancient tomb. See if you can see it. We have to be very careful because it's right in a place where people walk, and we need to be careful that we don't walk on it. So here we have our foliate head. There were two. The one on the other side got knocked off during the Reformation by the iconoclasts, but this one survives. All three churches in the Old Town have foliate heads of some kind or another, and of course every year one of the great annual events of Hastings is the Jack in the Green, and the Jack in the Green will have a service on the Sunday nearest to the 1st of May here in this church. So a view that nobody would have had, well, unless they had a long ladder, nobody would have had until fairly recently, because we're now up in the new balcony looking down on the church. When regiments lay up their flags, they put them into churches, and here we have some flags here. I think they're from the Royal Sussex Regiment, which are laid up here in St Clements. Also from up here in the balcony we get a different view of the belfry, and we have 8 bells here. The bells are relatively new. They were put here to commemorate the Battle of Hastings, and they were put here in 1966. In 2016, another anniversary of that particular battle, the people of the town were asked to make these small tapestry panels depicting themselves in the town doing things that they do in the town, and these are all hanging here in the church, showing people of the town and the things that they do. They're on this side of the rail and they're also on the other. So once again, the tapestry panels hanging here on the new balcony, just depicting Hastings in the early 21st century, and hopefully they'll form a fantastic record for the future. And here we have the books associated with that tapestry, and within the books photographs of people with their tapestry panel, just saying who they are and what they made and why they made it. And then here, top left hand corner, there's me dressed as a green man, my wife Heather next to me dressed as a milkmaid, and my son being a Morris dancer. This is the community of Hastings. Here we are, a living church.